Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Ayes and welcome to my YouTube channel. I recently published my list of the top 10 video games that released and played by yours truly this year. Unfortunately, it is time to tackle the other side of the spectrum, and we will do it by discussing 10 games that were either disappointing or heavily criticized during my playthroughs. Before we begin, I would like to set a few important ground rules. First, by no means does this video have the intention of beating a dead horse by adding another unenthusiastic take on the featured video games. If by any chance the developers of these titles happen to watch this video, I would like you to look at my opinions as constructive criticisms, and I will make sure to voice them as such and as respectfully as possible. Secondly, the first 8 games that we will discuss are not necessarily bad, rather they let me down on one or multiple fronts. The last 2 games, however, really took a lot out of me on my quest to complete them. Lastly, this list is definitely subjective. If you have other games that you would feature on your list, please let me know in the comment section and we will discuss them. Without further ado, let's rank my top 10 worst video games of 2022. Number 10, Pac-Man Museum Plus. If you're a fan of Pac-Man, you must check out Pac-Man Museum Plus. It is a dream come true for fans of Pac-Man. There is a fantastic gameplay base and visual variety for the catalog of games. The leaderboards improve the title's replay value. The layout of the main menu is straight up cool. There is a lot to appreciate about the number 10 spot on this list, even though some game selections are clearly better than others. With that in mind, why did I decide to include this game on my list? It is primarily because I personally did not find the replay value that appealing. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy a session of Pac-Man here and there, but Pac-Man Museum Plus did not do much to entice me to keep it on my hard drive once the review was done. I still recommend that you check out the title, but I somewhat wish that the collection offered a more enticing reward to encourage me to play its various offerings over and over again. Number 9, Pokemon Violet. At its core, Pokemon Violet is the best Pokemon game that I played since the original Soul Silver back on the Nintendo DS. The 3 storyline plot is interesting, the base gameplay is as addicting as ever, the available Pokemon finds a great balance within its roster, and the ending and postgame content are rather decent and take me back to the days of Soul Silver. I hope that we can reach a moment in time when we can get a Pokemon game with every Pokemon in existence being available on its roster, but that's a problem that I may bring up in another video down the road. Based on my description thus far, you would not expect this game to be on a top 10 worst list. However, I feel that many gamers can agree with my reason for its inclusion here, the technical performance. I cannot pinpoint a single culprit. Is it the Nintendo Switch's hardware? Is it Game Freak's understanding that their games do not have to be of top quality for them to sell ridiculously well? Is it Nintendo's forceful request that there will be a new Pokemon game every year? Only time will give us the answer. I do not mind if there is a year without a Pokemon game, as long as the next title will improve in terms of quality. After several patches, you should check out Pokemon Violet. If you could only experience it in its state at launch, I would probably skip it. Number 8, The Callisto Protocol. It saddens me to talk about the Callisto Protocol here for 2 reasons. On one hand, I'm a huge fan of the Dead Space trilogy, and I believe that the Callisto Protocol would follow in its footsteps. On the other hand, the number 8 spot on this list was my most anticipated video game of 2022. If you do not believe me, I will include my video of the top 10 most anticipated games of 2022 in the description box. At any rate, I am getting ahead of myself. The Callisto Protocol is not nearly as bad as people on Twitter have made it out to be, even prior to its current state. The facial animations are exceptional, the outdoor environmental design is superb, the voice acting performances are pretty great, and the lore is interesting to say the least. I also enjoyed the combat system, despite the fact that I had to get used to it with practice. Nonetheless, there are a few complaints that cannot be ignored as far as I'm concerned. There is a number of unanswered plot-related questions, but they will hopefully be resolved in the DLC or the sequel. The side bosses, quote-unquote, good lord. There is only one side boss that you have to kill 4 times, and he is a bullet sponge. Future playthroughs lessen my frustration, but the initial playthrough was definitely full of it. It is a shame since Dead Space has more boss fights, side bosses, and main bosses including than the Callisto Protocol. Finally, the indoor infrastructure as a whole is quite repetitive. It makes sense, but it becomes noticeable over time. I am one of those people that would love to see a sequel to the Callisto Protocol. Yet I'm also crossing my fingers that the sequel is a substantial improvement over its predecessor. Number 7. Pokemon Legends Arceus. I will give Nintendo credit here. Instead of going the route of a traditional Pokemon game, Pokemon Legends Arceus takes a very different approach by allowing you to place yourself into the land of Pokemon and make them more formidable than ever before. I cannot exactly put my finger on it, but I appreciate the different nature of this game compared to titles such as Pokemon Violet. Now, let's talk about some positives, shall we? The animations for evolutions are great, the amount of content on deck here is very impressive, the story has some interesting elements, and the gameplay can be addicting, with a combination of technical throw and catch gameplay mechanics and a typical fighting system. If you're content with the gameplay here, you may love Pokemon Legends Arceus. As far as I'm concerned, I felt like I had a lot of grinding to do in order to fully appreciate the title, and eventually I became disinterested. Furthermore, the environmental design is disappointing, but again, it could very well be one of the reasons that I mentioned with regards to the technical issues of Pokemon Violet. Pokemon Legends Arceus takes a different and bold approach, and for that alone, it deserves my respect. If a few tweaks are implemented, I have no doubt that a sequel could be truly special and appease all fans of the IP in question. Number 6. MLB The Show 22. MLB The Show 22 is not bad nor disappointing. However, I decided to include it here because it highlights a huge problem that affects most sports games nowadays such as Madden, NHL, NBA 2K, and FIFA. Please keep in mind that I am not a professional player of either IP, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. It seems to me that we reached a point where the yearly sports offerings cannot make any substantial improvements outside of slightly tweaking gameplay here and there or bringing back modes that were taken out of past titles due to hardware limitations or corporate greed. Take NBA 2K23 for example. As it stands now and due to obvious reasons, there is no game out there right now that touches NBA 2K23 when it comes to gameplay mechanics, visual fidelity, and the sheer number of modes. The same can be said about MLB The Show 22, which is the best baseball game that I've ever played. I would like to reiterate that MLB The Show 22 is neither disappointing nor terrible. However, I wanted to reserve a spot on this list to bring a certain question to light. What can the developers of these sports games do now to show substantial jumps between this year's version and next year's iteration of the franchise? Number 5. Overwatch 2. I can already sense one of my Twitch viewers typing away at the keyboard while raising an eyebrow at the placement of Overwatch 2 on this list. But there are two very good reasons for it. Before we dive into them, let's cover some positive aspects of the title. The visuals are nice and slick. The gameplay is fun and team-based with tons of character variations. The modes for competitive and non-competitive gameplay are well explained. Most importantly, it is free of charge. These characteristics are all fine and dandy, but it takes us straight into the first reason why Overwatch 2 is disappointing to me. Although I really enjoyed the original Overwatch's package, I cannot help but feel that Overwatch 2 is simply the original Overwatch 1 with a few more maps and a few more characters. There is a saying that says if it ain't broke, don't fix it. While it is true for some franchises, I expect them more from a company that makes millions of dollars on a yearly basis from franchises such as Diablo and World of Warcraft. The other reason for my disappointment is the lack of a story mode. Despite the promise that it will be a part of Overwatch 2, the plot may be added down the road with a patch, but it is not available as of the recording of this video. In the end, Overwatch 2 is a great free-to-play multiplayer experience, but one that will not bring you on the side of the good guys if you have not enjoyed the original Overwatch in the slightest. Number 4. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. One of my favorite anime shows is the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Yugi's story, aka the first several seasons, was enticing and the card game was addicting to the point that I purchased and collected cards as well as played every Yu-Gi-Oh! Video game that I could get my hands on. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel was another free-to-play game that aims to please fans of the franchise on a surface level. The animations and environments are beautiful and the online connections while battling other players are solid. Unfortunately, it is here where my praise of the game ends. Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel does an unexceptional job at introducing the rules to the people who are not already fans of the IP. In addition, the amount of single-player content is disappointing, and the full-blown animations for monsters, while very appealing, only apply to a specific number of monsters. I understand that it's a free-to-play game, so some sacrifices had to be made. Nevertheless, it does not excuse the existence of Master Duel on the same platform as Legacy of the Duelist, which offers much more content and only costs $20. If we can learn anything from the number 5 and number 4 picks on this list, it's that free-to-play games may not be the right move, despite higher-ups at publishing companies thinking that they will net them more money through microtransactions. Number 3, Mario Strikers Battle League. When we talked about Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, I mentioned the lack of content at display as one of its reasons for its downfall. I did not give it too much of a hard time because it was free to play. Mario Strikers Battle League does not only offer an unquestionable lack of content, but also a few modes that were in the game and yet were unplayable at launch. To top it all off, the game cost $60 per Nintendo standards. When the announcement for the game made its way to the public, I was excited because it has been years since we received a new Mario Strikers game. When I purchased and started to play it, I found some enjoyment. The animations for the hypershots are stunning, there is a great arcade-based feeling for a soccer title, and the presentation overall is nice. Needless to say, Mario Strikers Battle League came out in an incomplete state. It was not incomplete in a technical sense, as Nintendo games usually come out in a very polished state. Rather, it was incomplete in terms of content. When Nintendo releases its next console, hopefully we can get a true and packed experience in a next generation Mario Strikers title. Battle League is fine for kids, but that's about it. Number 2, Saints Row. Prior to playing this year's Saints Row, I have yet to complete the Saints Row game. I played a bit of Saints Row 4 and Get Out of Hell, but only enough to make some first impressions. With that being said, Saints Row 2022 is the first title in the series that I beat, and I truly hope that it is not an indication for what I should expect with the rest of the franchise. Saints Row 2022 is one of the 2 titles on this list that presented a lot of obstacles in front of me on my way to the end credits. The environments are filled with bad textures and glitches, the narrative offers writing and plot devices that are not my cup of tea, the characters did not make any personal connection with me, and the gameplay is not as fun compared to my brief time with the other Saints Row games that I tried. A few of the songs on the set list are great, and the lighting can be nice at times, but Saints Row 2022 has received a lot of pushbacks by diehard fans and comic gamers, and honestly, I can absolutely understand the frustration. I've been told that the highlight of the series is Saints Row 2, so maybe the developers can look to it as inspiration to make their next game much better than 2022's offering. Number 1, Dragon Ball The Breakers. We arrived at the worst game that I played this year, and I must be honest and a tad brutal here. Dragon Ball The Breakers is not only deserving of the number 1 spot, but it is officially my least favorite Dragon Ball game of all time. As blasphemous as it may sound, I'd rather play Dragon Ball GT Final Bout on the PlayStation 1 than this recent title for the PlayStation 5 and other consoles. Before I go on a tirade, let me explain why I cannot bring myself to play this game again. My opinion may change if I would have liked titles such as Dead by Daylight, but I really do not like the hide and seek gameplay on display here, which in my opinion is very boring. Speaking of which, the quote-unquote cat is overpowered against the quote-unquote mouse, leading to situations where you have no chance of survival. Outside of the gameplay itself, there is only a single mode in this $20 offering, which is absolutely ridiculous. Lastly, there is a severe lack of iconic heroes and foes, since it relies on solely the main villains of Dragon Ball Z. This game is not completely awful, the character models can be nice at times. Sadly, it is the biggest compliment that I can give the game. It is fine to take risks from time to time. I have my issues with Pokemon Legends Arceus, but I had a good time with it. I cannot say the same about Dragon Ball The Breakers. Bandai Namco, please stick to role-playing games or fighting games. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot and Dragon Ball FighterZ are light years ahead of The Breakers, which unfortunately cements its mark as my least favorite video game of 2022. Well folks, that's the end of the video. Thank you very much for checking it out. What is the worst game that you played this year? Hopefully you did not play many games this year that made you scratch your head and question the path that the gaming industry is currently taking. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Till next time, have a great day or evening wherever you are. My name is AES, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.